In preparation for the new Fantastic Four First Steps coming out this July, I decided let's take a look back at the previous Fantastic Four films. Unfortunately, we're not going to be taking a look at the very first Fantastic Four movie. I believe it was like a VHS type movie, and to be honest, it's heralded as one of the worst superhero movies ever made, and I don't exactly know where I could find that movie to even, stream it or whatever, or get a copy of it whatsoever. So we're going to skip the very, very old one. I'm sure a lot of people could find information on it and all sorts of stuff like that. But today, we're going to be talking about 2005's version of Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four, directed by Tim Story, tells the story of Reed Richards, Ben Grimm, Sue, and Johnny Storm as they travel to space, but once being hit by this radioactive storm of sorts, their bodies start to change and they become fantastic. Now, my major hot take for this movie, that I think a lot of people would say that this movie is garbage and it's one of the worst ever made, I'm going to sit here right now after watching this movie and saying that I don't think it's the worst Fantastic Four movie or superhero movie ever made. I genuinely think there's a lot of really good ideas in this film. I just think some of it is a little rushed. And then some other aspects of the story I don't think is very rushed, and I think it's slow. So that's kind of like my major thing going into this, is there's stuff that I really did enjoy, and then there's a lot of stuff that should have been improved on. Let's get started with the major thing out of the way first, which is the cast. Ioan Gruffudd, Michael Chiklis, Chris Evans, and Jessica Alba are honestly really good choices for the cast. Of the least really good aspect of the cast is Jessica Alba, because I just don't think her acting is stellar in this movie, but the other three I thought were actually really, really great. And the two best people in this movie, I think, is Michael Chiklis and Chris Evans as Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm. It's been talked about since that Michael Chiklis really took the character to heart for Ben Grimm and really wanted to put on a really good performance for this movie, and it shows. I think he has one of the best arcs in the movie, and that is something that we'll dive into more. And I think Chris Evans is also a really good stand-in for Johnny Storm, and it's honestly one of my big worries for the new Fantastic Four movie, because they have Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm, and I don't know, we'll see how it goes, I guess, but, initial thoughts are kind of, cautious, I'll say. But first, we're kicking off the story with Reed Richards and Ben Grimm going to Victor Von Doom's Enterprise. Reed has some research that he's been discovering about a storm that's been flying through space, and I just have to say the first thing that we see with Victor Von Doom in person is that he's in shadow. Why? Why is he just covered in shadow? I don't really understand this. Is this supposed to be the ominous, like, he's the bad guy of the movie? Ooh, it's kind of weak, and it's just honestly weird. Like, if you're thinking logically, like, this is a building with, like, all this money poured into it. This is an office. This is his office. Why is there shadows casted around us? Just get an electrician in there to get some lights in there, please. So this is where we are also introduced to Julian McMahon as Victor Von Doom, and this is going to be one of the other major flaws for this movie. Genuinely do not understand what the hell they were thinking with Dr. Doom in this film. There really isn't a ton of stuff in here that I think is true to the comics, and let me be upfront too, with a lot of the stuff here, as I stated earlier, I don't think it's as bad as people say, but also I'm not too familiar with the comics and the entire lore that is behind the Fantastic Four. I think that a lot of it that I know of has been secondhand sort of telling, and then whatever the movies have kind of told me. So pardon me if I think a lot of this stuff, might be somewhat true to the character, but I can tell you this for sure. This Dr. Doom does not seem like he's the actual representation of what is in the comics, because they really don't bring up Latveria in this really at all. I mean, there's like a mask that he gets later on in the movie, and it's shown from like a special sort of like, well, people of Latveria give this to you, enjoy and represent Latveria by not representing Latveria. It's pretty weak. This is not a really good representation of the character. I think that the animosity that Victor has towards Reed should be the thing that kind of overshadows his character to a fault, obviously. And I just don't see it in this a lot of the times. It just kind of feels like this guy's just a businessman that wants to make money off of any and everything he can. And it's, once again, like I said, it's just not a very good representation. I think that they really missed the mark on this, and they do yet again in the other reboot. But regardless, we also see Sue Storm come in, and it is implied that, you know, Victor and her are in a relationship right now. And we also see Reed kind of be like, oh, that used to be my girlfriend, and now we're not girlfriend, boyfriend anymore, and it's kind of a little awkward. And this is what another thing that I just didn't like for this movie at the very beginning is just, why is the Fantastic Four not together, really? Like, I think that's why I kind of like the idea that we're going with right now with this new Fantastic Four, with Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, and everybody, because the team is already kind of together. More than likely, we're just going to get some flashbacks of some things and go from there. But like this movie, maybe it's more so my problem is just Reed and Sue. I don't know why they're just not together. It just doesn't make sense for it, and it makes the relationship really hard to get into, and it feels very unsatisfying towards the end of the film. But Reed sends this proposal to Victor. They talk about the proposal, and then they decide, yep, we're just going to go to space, and we're going to go look at this radioactive, intense storm that's coming our way just to do some research, which I don't really hate the premise of it. What I hate is just the quick turnaround time to go to space. It's just kind of brushed off as like this, yeah, we're just going to go to space in about a couple days, you know, so get ready. And it is just kind of, okay, I guess that's what they're going for. And this is also another part of the movie where I think a negative should be shined on, is that I think the movie's about an hour 45. And I think this movie could have benefited for an extra like 15 minutes, 20 minutes even. It feels a little too short for a superhero movie to be an hour 45. And what's worse is that the next movie is 15 minutes shorter. Regardless, we jump from having Reed and Ben and Sue and Victor in the Empire building that Victor has made for himself. We now get Johnny Storm making out with a chick on a dirt road somewhere, and this is our introduction to him, and the music choice is very interesting here. So now the team is all brought up together, they get their suits, they all start talking to each other, they go up to space. Again, like I said, it's a very quick turnaround. And then this really big thing that Reed was predicted, and that Reed wanted to go there and research and make sure that we can study it for purposes down on Earth and to look at, like, you know, the mutations of things. Initially it was going to take several hours. Now it's just suddenly going to be here in like 7 minutes or whatever. So as the storm approaches, and Ben has no idea that it's approaching because he just can't turn to his left to see this giant ass weird thing in space coming towards him, they try to reel him in from the outside of the ship, and in doing so, the parts of the storm enter the ship, which then mutates everybody's cells. Really thankful that there's really not anybody else on the ship other than these 5 characters that we're gonna have to deal with throughout the entire movie. So again, I'm kind of stating a lot of the negatives at the very beginning of the movie, which is unfortunate because I do kind of enjoy parts of this movie, but let's not understate how just kind of weird and awkward this stuff is. Again, this feels very rushed. There is not a ton of character development here, and there really isn't a ton of sense that is made, at least that I can see here. But they return home, everyone is okay. I kind of like the little fake out that they do at the beginning with Johnny talking to Ben about, oh, you know, the doctors couldn't, you know, fix your face, I'm a jackass, blah, blah, blah. I think it's kind of funny because what you have coming up next is a lot of the discovering of the powers for the Fantastic Four. Mostly between Johnny turning into the Human Torch, because we get a little cameo from Maria Menounos. Hey, what are you doing here, Maria? Get back on the movie screen and talk about Nuvi. This isn't where you're supposed to be. So we see that the nurse is taking his temperature, and then it's shown on the screens that he's like well over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and then they end up go snowboarding because Johnny is just so hot. And it's kind of fun. They do little things like that to kind of, you know, tease like there's something going on with these guys and everything. One of the other things that I enjoyed is that Johnny Storm looks at Reed Richards, and it's just a subtle thing, and I don't know why I like it so much. Maybe because it is that quick and subtle, is that when they get back to Earth, Johnny looks at Reed and goes, oh, I like the little highlights of the gray in your hair. But then you get this snowboarding scene, and it is just literally insane. It is 2000s to the max with the way that it's cut together and the music that they have and the ending of the scene.
I think we should drop like 10 more feet.
Good.
Last one down, springs for room service.
I never thought you'd be so easily just
My future wife! Care to join me?
It is a little insane, but that's how we then progress more into the powers. We then see Sue and we see Reed go out to dinner, and Sue turns invisible, and then Reed catches a bottle from falling, and then this is where we see Ben slightly transformed. There really isn't anything on screen, unfortunately, for this part. It's a lot of kind of covered up, and it's not really shown, but they do portray it a little bit as the monstrous sort of transformation, so I can like the approach to that for the most part, but I wish there was a little bit more of a scene showing like actual rocks forming on him. This leads to honestly the best part of the movie entirely, which is Michael Chiklis' portrayal as Ben Grimm and the presentation of Ben Grimm and his arc for the most part throughout the movie, because we see Ben Grimm going back to his home where he has Debbie that he is either engaged or married to, and he is trying to call her to come outside and just be like, hey, I know that, you know, I might look a little different, but can we try to work this out? And she's just kind of horrified by him and runs off. I do like this arc because this is the thing that's going to continue for the rest of the film. We're going to see a lot through Ben's perspective, how the public treats him and how they see him. And the suit honestly looks really good. I know that he feels a little bit shorter than you might want. The thing should be very much more towering and almost like on the scale of like the Hulk per se, but for this story, I think it's fine. I know that the new Fantastic Four is going to do a little bit of CGI and a little bit of practical effects, probably most of CGI, honestly, but at least for the practical effects approach to this movie, I think it works out really well. Again, there's some really good stuff here with Ben. We see him go to the bridge and he just kind of sits there and he's talking to like God, obviously, and just reminiscing about his life and how it's, you know, kind of a shit show now. But a guy apparently doesn't see him on top of the bridge and wants to jump, and then the guy sees him and now he's horrified and doesn't want to jump, and he's scared of Ben now. So this whole next scene has got a mix of good and bad with it, obviously. I think that obviously the way that it's portrayed that the Fantastic Four like save the day when they cause the wreckage on this bridge to begin with is a little weird. And also the idea of like how Reed and Sue and Johnny can't get through this ginormous crowd of people, even though it's really not a ton of people. It's a little awkward and not portrayed well, and there are parts of it that I do kind of enjoy. I like the idea of Sue using her force field kind of invisible powers to kind of contain flames from some burning trucks. I like how Ben stops the semi to begin with so he doesn't get run over, and I like how Johnny kind of saves this little girl from an exploding car, but also part of it seems a little weird because yes, he could turn on fire, but it's not like he's like making this huge shield around them. Like I feel like that the little girl would be kind of, you know, in flames, or at least the hair might be. And at the end of it, you see them all standing together. The cops are going to arrest them, and then New York goes, hey, they saved people. Don't arrest them because they're good people. And it's like, no, they kind of destroyed a lot of shit and they saved maybe a handful of people, but they created the mess. This is their fault. But in this, you get some more Ben Grimm stuff that I do love, where it doesn't make sense that his wife Debbie shows up. It just doesn't make sense that she's there, because she already saw him once, and I guess she saw him on TV maybe and thinks, wow, I know that bridge. We got to go to that bridge and see him. That part doesn't make sense how she just gets there, right? But the part that I do like for it is where she takes off the ring and she puts it on the ground, basically signifying that the end of the marriage, we're done together. I don't want to see you ever again, which seems a little harsh because they didn't really talk about it. But the thing that I love most about this is we see Ben trying to pick up the ring and he just can't do it. The visual storytelling of this, I think, is really good. It's very reminiscent to me. That gets done years later, obviously, because this was in 2005, and Spider-Man 3 was obviously years later. It's reminiscent of the scene in Spider-Man 3 where Sandman is trying to pick up the locket of his daughter when he turns into the Sandman, and he has to build the strength to do it. But Reed has to come in and pick up the ring for him and give it to him. I just like little shit like that. It's kind of cool. It gets a little extra brownie points for this movie for that. During all this, however, when everyone comes back to Earth, Victor is told from the board of directors that the company is going to go out of business. It's losing all its stock. You need to turn around the business in the next week, which is kind of crazy because I don't know how the business can be going that down to shit that quick, honestly. In the sense of at the beginning, it's just seen as like a failed experiment, but honestly, like the public doesn't know really what happened. They know that a ship went up there, and then the ship came back, and the people are quarantined for medical procedures, I would imagine. So outside of that, it's like, what is the company going under for? And now it's a little bit more understandable to see that these are the researchers that happen to go to space, and now look at the mutations and look how weird that they are. That part I understand. But then Victor being told that the company's going to go out of business in like 3 days, and you got to turn around like right now. Otherwise, it's just, we're done. We're going to sell it and everything is going to go. It seems a little weird. And again, it turns back to this rushed aspect of things where it's just like, but that doesn't feel very developed now, does it? This is the portion of the movie where you get the obligatory sort of researching the powers and testing the powers scene, which you don't get a ton of nowadays. And maybe it's my nostalgia talking, but I do end up liking the stuff that they do around here. In moderation, however, there is some things in here that is really good, and then there's some things that are not so good. Like the stuff with Ben, for example, you get to see that the inside of his body, when they're performing a physical on him, you get to see that his whole body is covered in rocks now. It's not just his exterior, like his heart, his lungs. Everything is completely covered in stone now. And when they perform a physical where they have to tap the knee with the hammer, the medical hammer that, you know, Sue Storm is using that most doctors would have doesn't really do anything. So Reed gets the idea of like, let's just grab a regular hammer, and does it. And, you know, it kicks his leg and sends a stool to the top floor. So that little stuff is fun. And seeing Reed and Sue talk about her powers and kind of see how it is like more light manipulation, and she could use it for other things other than just turning things invisible. That stuff is fun to see too. But I think the best one, but also the weirdest one, is Johnny Storm, because you see Johnny in this chamber where he just lights on fire, and they're just testing to see how hot he can get. This is very key information for the film here, because he goes up in temperature, up and up and up and up, and he gets to supernova level, keep that word in mind. And in this chamber, Reed at some point is like saying like he's getting higher than I expected, and then they just blow a bunch of fire extinguishers at him and he's just doused. Which seems a little weird, because if this chamber is starting to melt with him inside of it, I don't understand how just a ton of fire extinguishers are going to just make him doused out like that. That part is weird. But the idea of him, like, just the temperature that he can get to, obviously, that stuff I enjoy. And so Reed's big solution to this, which is the dumbest shit in the entire movie, and this definitely brings the movie down for me a lot when watching some stuff, rewatching it, taking notes on it, and looking back at it. Reed's big fucking solution is to make a machine to recreate the radioactivity that was out in space from the storm, to reverse the damage that was done to their molecules, to revert them back to being normal. If you had the scientific knowledge, if you had the materials to do this, then why did you need to go to space to begin with, is the major complaint that is here. It's kind of weird. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And it kind of just feels like they needed a way to get the thing out of the picture for a little bit in the final battle before coming back. And this was their grand solution, and it's not very good. In all this, you see Victor talking to Reed and talking to Sue and talking to everybody and talking to the board of directors, trying to figure out a solution to get his company back on track. But throughout this, you also see that Victor is like absorbing metal, and his hands are turning metal, and he's got like scars on his face, and it's just kind of weird to see. And Victor's kind of taking it a little bit as like a calmer approach than you would imagine. And I think that's the other problem I have with some of this too, is some of the reactions to some of the things that they can do is a little bit calmer than you would want them to, especially with Victor, and especially with Ben at points too, even though I like his arc. And I would say, honest to God, even, you know, Reed at some point too. But regardless, you see Victor kind of going around talking to everybody, and then, you know, getting the feel of like what his plan is going to be now since the company is to shit. So his grandiose idea outside of all of this is, after the board comes to him and tells him that he's out and that they're selling the company, very reminiscent of the first Spider-Man movie, because after the Spider-Man movie, everybody had to be Spider-Man. It was just kind of a template at that point. Victor decides to go about his business and kill the main board of director dude out of spite with some electricity. Because in this movie, his power is to shoot electricity and absorb electricity and turn metal. When in the comics, he kind of has this cosmic power, Doctor Strange-esque type deal, and it's very different. And there might be electricity stuff in the comics that he does. I don't know. I don't personally know most of that stuff. but judging from some of the things that I have seen, I think this stuff is very weird, and it is not Doctor Doom. And because everybody's cooped up in this lab, Johnny then has another fun scene where he decides to go out into the world and do like a dirt bike racing thing and show off the new suits that they're wearing with the number 4 attached to his suit. And then he goes on TV and tells everybody what their superhero power names are. And then this is when you get a pretty fun little fight between Johnny and Ben. Ben shows up to the place that Johnny was at, crushes up the car into like a huge giant metal ball, throws it at Johnny, and then they start kind of going at it for a quick second. Again, feels a little rushed at times. It doesn't feel like the tension between everybody is always there, especially when it's Reed and Ben to a point. Ben and Johnny is a little bit easier to kind of go into and understand because they kind of had the tension from the very beginning from them meeting each other. So that's a little bit more believable, but the rest of the team doesn't have that much tension with themselves. Later on, you get some more fun Ben Grimm stuff where he goes to a bar and he's trying to have a drink and he breaks a stool and then he breaks a glass, and the owner of the bar knows him and he tells everybody that's looking at him that, hey, this guy is from around here, he's an astronaut, he's an American hero, you guys need to respect him and not be disrespectful to him. And I just love the shot of Ben like breaking the stool, and he gets up and he like kind of turns around and he kind of looks, and everyone's just kind of looking at him all funny. And then it's introduced that this girl that's sitting at the table is talking to him because he says something that's effective like, if there is a God, he hates me. And then she comes in and says that she is not so kind or whatever, or something like that. I don't know, but I didn't have it written in my notes here, honestly. But the idea of this is fun. Ben ends up seeing this woman and she is blind. She doesn't know what this guy looks like, obviously, at all. So when she goes up to him, she feels like around his arms and his chest and his face and sees that it's all stone, but she doesn't really care because obviously she can't see anything anyways. And then she ends up leaving. So now Ben has a little bit of a love interest with this chick now. Really fun stuff. I really enjoyed this scene, like I said, even though I don't remember what she said specifically, but I do enjoy this scene. And I think it's a fun little addition to the movie. This is where you start to get the bad shit again, though, because you start to see Victor go up to Ben and he starts to be like, hey, Sue and Reed are kind of getting a little touchy-touchy, lovey-lovey again, and like, you know, he said that he was going to help you turn back to normal, and now we're just, you know, they're just lovey-dovey again, and I don't understand why, you know, you would be interested in having Reed help you out now when you can come to me and I can help you out. It's just fucking stupid because at the very beginning of the movie, we see Ben talking with Reed about the relationship that the two of them had prior to this movie, obviously, that we don't get to see. And Ben's the one to tell Reed to go back for Sue because they have romantic tension still, the two of them. So when Ben ends up going back to the laboratory after Reed and Sue have a little night out together, they have another mini fight between characters, and this one is less intense than the Johnny one, but it's still fun. It shows that Mr. Fantastic, while he is a stretchy guy and he doesn't have this insane power like being on fire or super strength and indestructible, he's more than capable of holding his own against some of these guys. And it's a fun little scene here, but it's also overshadowed by the fact that like Ben is mad at him for talking to Sue when he was the one telling him to fucking talk to Sue in the first place. But then you get one of the funniest moments in the movie, honestly, right here.
Look what the marketing guys did. Look, check it out. Listen. You love this.
It's clobbering time!
It's catchy, right?
On a side note, I do love the little picture that goes around on the internet with the thing. It's this one right here where it says, "Madam, 'tis the clobbering hour." I love it. I don't know. I got no other comment on that. You see Reed try to use the machine that he created here at this point, and Reed's machine, when he comes out of it after trying to turn it on, he is still stretchy and it becomes even worse. He becomes like a little bit more deformed, so it shows that the machine's not working. Then you see Victor talk to Ben. They kind of do a rope around where they plan to get together and figure out the problem for themselves. They go back to the laboratory, and then Victor, with his electricity powers, is able to power up the system more to revert Ben back to being normal. During this, you see Victor again in the dark, just as a blatant, like, he's on the dark side of, you know, the Force. Like, it's, oh, he's gonna turn into Anakin maybe. It's kind of dumb. I don't understand why this guy's in fucking shadow for parts of this movie. It's really stupid. Once Ben is turned back to normal, we see Victor go back to his place. He grabs the metal mask. He is now full-blown Victor Von Doom. He gets Reed Richards. He brings him back to his place. He fills him up with hydrogen peroxide because he's made of rubber. And he starts talking to him like, you know what happens with rubber? When you freeze it, it snaps. And like he's messing around with his hands and stuff. And you get to see a close-up on the mask with Victor wearing it. And he goes, call me Doom. It's dumb. It's really cheesy and dumb. The suit's kind of fine. I don't hate the suit, honestly. It's pretty close to comic accurate, to be honest. It's a little tacky at points, but like I get the vibe that they were going for. It's not the worst thing in the world. It gets worse later on, obviously, but I do enjoy the suit for the most part. This whole thing, though, with the Victor and Reed fight and then him turning into a popsicle, basically, is kind of weird. And during this time, we see Victor and Reed talking about his evil plans. And because they're on opposite ends of, like, the town, I guess, or wherever, they're many buildings apart. He sends a missile to where the rest of the team is at that laboratory. And this is where Johnny gets to learn how to fly at this point. And it's a fun scene. I do enjoy the scene. You get to hear the iconic flame on. It's a fun scene with Johnny. You then end up going back to the place where Victor is at. And Sue's trying to help Reed. And she tries to fight Dr. Doom to no avail. And then during this time, Ben just turns back into the thing in a machine that didn't apparently have enough power to do it before, but now he had enough power to turn back into the thing, and then he's got to say his catchphrase again. And during this, though, they do have a fight, and they have the Wilhelm screen, not once, but twice. It's just like, why would they do that? I wrote in my notes that, why the fuck is the Wilhelm screen in this? And then it happened again. They did it again in all caps. So why the fuck would they do this? So there's a little bit of a fight with the Thing and Sue Storm and Reed Richards, and then, you know, Johnny ends up coming in, and this is our hero shot of the movie with the four of them, you know, trying to figure out how to take down Doom. And this is the part of the movie that gets fucking stupid again, because this final fight is lame. It's broken up periodically throughout this time so that Reed could fight every other one individually. And I understand that the concept of that is you take down each one individually so that once they form together, it's a team. They're fighting as one. They're not fighting individually. That's how they can defeat Dr. Doom. I believe that. I understand that. I could see it happening. Kudos to you for making it crystal clear to me that that's what's happening. But the fight is kind of lame. It doesn't have any weight to it. I don't give a shit about anybody here other than Ben and Johnny, honestly. And their grand idea at the end of this is to do the supernova thing, where Johnny's going to do a circle around Victor and go, you're going to stay right here. I'm going to burn you up in this metal suit that you're in now. And then Sue is going to use a force field to cover up the flames from Johnny so it doesn't evaporate the city, which is dumb because if you remember when we were talking earlier, Reed tells Johnny that supernova is bad because you can destroy the Earth's atmosphere. So in my eyes, if he's getting that fucking hot to begin with, wouldn't that mean that, like, the material on the, like, the street would start to melt? Like, everything around him would start to melt, and, like, there would be, like, maybe a crater of something? Like, why is it just, like, there's just a burnt hole in the ground? Like, and Victor ends up getting, you know, burned. It's very, very dumb. So they do that. They break one of the pumps that's on the street to spray water all over him. And then you eventually see that Victor Von Doom is just a metal statue of himself now, which is a callback to the very beginning of the movie because the first shot is of Victor as a metal statue in front of his building. So, haha, thanks movie for, you know, foreshadowing. They end up taking Victor away. He is now going to go and be shipped off to wherever at this point. And then you get the heroes kind of collective sort of, huzzah, we beat the bad guy on a yacht with all the Fantastic Four and a group of people. And this is also where you get Reed and Sue rekindling their romance yet again, where Reed then proposes to Sue, they kiss, and then Johnny and everyone's watching them kiss, and then everyone's like, oh, isn't this so nice? Johnny gets off the boat, makes a big, you know, old Fantastic Four logo in the sky, and then the movie is done. There's a post-credits scene for the movie, and it teases Dr. Doom coming back at some point with, like, the electricity flickering in whatever storage place that he is in. I will say the only last little note that I have for this part of the review is that the proposal feels very unearned here. I don't really care about Sue and Reed's relationship throughout the entire movie, and it, like I say, it's unearned. I just don't understand why Reed and her weren't together to begin with. It feels very, like like I said, it's unsatisfied. I just don't know why they weren't together. I didn't like their, relationship and how it's portrayed at all in this movie. And I don't remember how the second movie goes, but I can only imagine that it's just as bad, if not worse, in the second movie. Let's wrap everything up here and kind of go back to everything that's kind of been stated. I really do like a lot of things in this movie. There's a lot of good ideas, and then there's a lot of bad ideas. I genuinely do like the cast a lot. I think that at minimum, 2 out of the 4, but definitely 3 for me out of the 4 are really good representations of the characters, and I think they are done extremely well. I like the practical effects of The Thing. I like Michael Chiklis' portrayal of The Thing. I like his story throughout the entire movie. I like Chris Evans' story throughout the movie. There's a little argument scene that he has with Sue at one point closer to the end of the movie that I really enjoyed. It's a little bit cheesy at points, but it's enjoyable. It's early 2000s sort of movies, so I kind of have nostalgia for that sort of stuff. Obviously, there's also some bad stuff too here. For starters, Victor Von Doom is not how you would want him portrayed at all from the comics. I think it is very ham-fisted. I don't think it's good whatsoever, and it's only going to get worse, unfortunately. There is beats of the story that don't make sense. There is beats of the story that make me scratch my head and get frustrated with logic, and characterization for people is also thrown out the window for probably half of them in this. So again, there's good and bad stuff everywhere. You kind of just have to watch the movie, and there are things that you might enjoy more than not. I find a little bit more enjoyment out of this movie than maybe most people do, but I can understand why there is a ton of animosity towards this. I don't think it's one of the worst superhero movies ever made, but it's definitely not one of the best. I'm going to give Fantastic Four 2.5 stars. Thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to have more Fantastic Four reviews coming up very soon. Second one being, obviously, Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer. That'll be next month. And then the month after that will be Fant4stick, which I have not seen. So that'll be an interesting movie to watch. All the socials are down below for you guys to go take a look, where you got TikTok, Letterboxd, and Twitter, where we've got all sorts of stuff on there for film stuff, whether it's in TikTok form or Twitter, and then Letterboxd for just logging stuff and everything like that. So all of that to kind of catch up on what I'm doing. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Keep those cinemas alive, and I will talk to you all next time.